Forbes India GCC Leadership Exchange in association with Smartworks.
Hello and welcome to Forbes India GCC Leadership Exchange in association with Smartworks, the Pune Edition. I'm Mridu Bhandari. Pune's industrial legacy has long been its superpower, but for the global capability centers that call it home, that legacy is now being reimagined. These centers are no longer just managing support functions from a distance, they are claiming full ownership of the product lifecycle from prototyping and IP creation to global deployment. The question is no longer whether Pune can lead in engineering and R&D. The question is how fast can that transition be made and what does it truly take to get there? Today we are joined by four leaders navigating this very transition to explore what it means to move from execution to global ownership, from legacy infrastructure to agile integrated operating environments, and from engineering heritage to high-velocity innovation. Please welcome Sudish Panicker, MD and Co-Head, Global Operations, Fund and Investor Solutions and Site Executive, Bank of New York, India. Amit Talwar, Global VP, ABS and Manager, India, AGCO Corporation. We are also joined by Chothani, Head of UBS Service Company in India and Head of Group Technology India at UBS. And we are also joined by Neetish, Sarda, Founder and Managing Director at Smartworks. Welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us here today. Appreciate you joining us on the GCC Leadership Exchange Pune Edition. We're looking at the Pune GCC story and we are looking at the wider GCC story in India as well. Neetish, let me begin by asking you, how some of these collaborations and partnerships in the ecosystem are really the backbone. You have your Smart Vantage platform through which you offer GCCs, full services across the spectrum from compliance and taxation to talent acquisition, operational advisory, R&D, innovation. And all of this is delivered by curated alliance partners. One, what are the big trends you are seeing? And two, how do you go about curating this network of partners and how do you really assess their performance in the long term?
So, when we started Smartworks almost 8 years back, we thought of what are the challenges that we are solving. When we started this, it was mainly solving the challenge of giving a workspace to people who are looking at 200, 300 seats. How can you create an infrastructure for them to scale up? Interestingly, what has happened in India in the last 6-7 years is it's become the largest market for flex in the world. Over 100 million square foot of flex is operated out of India. What has evolved here is when that larger format take-ups have started happening on the flex industry. It is not just limited to people who are looking at 200-300 seats. It's actually people who are coming in, committing to 1,000-seater, 2,000 to 5,000 seats in a particular location. With that shift coming in, we realized that solving a problem of just giving space is not going to cut it. You need to give a little bit more. So at Smartworks, we like to think of ourselves as an experience company. We curate the entire experience right from the point that a customer enters into the building and how they are treated in each and every part of their office space. That's the reason we take up full campuses. We create the experience, curate the experience for the full building for the customers who are within Smartworks. Smart Vantage actually happens to be a program that we launched very recently, about 7 to 8 months back. We realized that there are two types of GCC outfits that are coming into India. There is one which has been in the country for a very long time, has already established and gotten to a certain base where it's now scaling up from there. A lot of, our panelists here have already achieved that. But there are a lot of others who are just entering into the market, understanding India, trying to understand and see which part of India do they want to grow in. Where are they getting the talent? So there, under Smart Vantage, we have actually tied up with other service providers where we give them the infrastructure for the offices, the experience, the flexibility to grow between cities. So it is something that helps the GCCs kickstart their initiative in India, get to a certain scale through the partnership, and then eventually If those relationships solidify and they continue using those partners, that's great. But SmartWorks' focus is to make sure that that initial period where you really need for that 1.5 years for the GCCs to come and solidify their presence, we are able to support them for more than just space, but also give them all the other, requirements that they have.
Fantastic. So I'm going to pick up that point of scaling up and come to you, Sudish. Now, BNY spent $3.8 billion on technology in 2025 alone. That's about 19% of your revenues, a higher share than pretty much any other large bank. What does this outlay really mean for your strategic work in India? And as an emerging global delivery hub, how do you really view scale? Is it about headcount or is it now about owning global outcomes?
Yeah, thank you for that. And look, at BNY, the way we think about technology is it really helps us scale growth, right? And we think of this shift in terms of being able to run our platforms more efficiently, being able to make sure that we come up with new products, we innovate new solutions, and we're able to serve our clients across the globe. So that's the way we think about this. When you talk about innovation and scale, it's not really mutually exclusive, right? So you could actually scale first, do a lot more innovation, but innovation also creates various kinds of capacity, which then helps you to scale in new areas, right? So we think of both of these in combination. Now, for us in BNY, we have two locations, Pune and Chennai, and these have been the hub of what we call strategic global locations. And these locations have been built on the premise that this is where we have the talent that really focuses on driving innovation. And we create a culture through which different teams across the organization can really come together. They can understand business problems and then they can drive business outcomes. And that's really been our focus. Now, when you think about it in the context of AI, I think we've had an advantage of being an early starter in the AI journey, right? So we started making our initial investments in AI back in 2023. In 2024, we decided to build our own AI platform. And that platform has really grown and matured along with all of our partners who have helped us in this journey. It's not about the tools that you deploy, but it is really using AI to reimagine and re-engineer your businesses. And that's what we are really focused on.
Right, absolutely. Well, Amit, I'm going to come to you with a wider lens now. As chairman of the Maharashtra GCC Forum, can you describe the impact that AI has really had on the GCC ecosystem? And what are some of the key initiatives to really equip GCCs in the region to capitalize on these emerging technologies, AI in particular, and emerging tech in general?
Thanks for a great question. And let me also say why we formed the Maharashtra CII GCC Forum. So the thought process was we had all the states coming up with GCC policies. It becomes pretty difficult for a principal sitting in a different part, Western world, trying to figure out where do we want to come. So CII decided that we need much more focus because Pune is called Oxford of the East. And if I look at a GCC, it's all about talent. And it goes to your question where you talk about the impact of AI on GCCs. Actually, I would say some of the initiatives we are trying to do at the CII GCC Forum is to be able to work with the government. Now, you talked about the Smart Vantage program. You're trying to see how easy it is. I've been associated with GCCs for over 25 years. It used to be super difficult to do all of this. Now you can do that online. Is it perfect? Not yet, but we're trying to get there. There's a lot of focus in Maharashtra, especially specifically the Honorable Chief Minister and his team in terms of what are we going to do to attract more GCCs into this metropolitan region, Mumbai, Pune, and then eventually go to the tier 2, which is Aurangabad and others. So we are trying to partner with academia as well as industry to be able to start making that change happen.
I also want to bring in Sameer at this point. Now, GCCs often talk about building future-ready organizations. But really, is future readiness a constantly moving target in this day and age? Because, what is it? what do you define as being future ready? And what do you think GCCs can do today to really stay ahead of the curve?
Well, and that's an interesting question. So, first of all, thank you for having us. If you look at the future readiness, I think if you rewind the clock a decade or two ago, we were famous for labor arbitrage. We kind of started to build capabilities. We started to own certain components of certain product development. And we said, okay, can we go the whole 9 years, right? I think resiliency, as my colleague talked about, is very important. Pandemic hit us, we were resilient. Other geopolitical stuff hit us, we are resilient. And if you look at we GCCs, I think in my mind need to transform from capability centers to adaptability centers. And why I say that is because the speed at which technology is changing, the kind of regulators requirements are coming at high speed. Talent dynamics are changing in the country because there's a war of talent on emerging tech, and the hunting ground is the same. And then the geopolitics stuff is hitting us. So if you look at these four dimensions, tech, geopolitical, talent, and the fourth one that I talk about, the speed at which we need to reorganize ourselves is becoming much, much more important to drive the client outcomes. And I think client outcomes are something which is why we are here for.
All right. Well, Neetish, years ago when the industry was still trading in seats and in square footage, Smartworks really began taking over entire buildings, converting them into tech-enabled campuses. In many ways, that change is perhaps being mirrored by the leap that GCCs are taking, especially in Pune, towards claiming ownership of the entire product life cycle. We do have a lot of talent in the city. Do you see parallels in the strategic pivots that you made then with the way GCCs are being changed now? And what are some key lessons that you'd share about that navigation at Smartworks?
Absolutely. I think, one of the things that you mentioned was the changing dynamics. How much the world has probably changed in the last 5 to 6 years. It hasn't happened in many decades before that, right? We had the pandemic. There's, AI, which is coming in. Everyone's talking about how geopolitics, there used to be one thing happening in the world. Now there are 5, 6 things happening across the world. So things are moving much quicker than they used to move. In this time, what is really lies at the center is flexibility. Offices earlier, if I look at probably 20, 30 years back, it was something that people used to come. Most of the people used to buy their own buildings, create their own campuses, and work out of there for 15, 20, 30 years. Then it came to a situation where people started leasing. They realized that buying and creating something, by the time you create anything, you're outpacing your growth and you don't know whether, you'll be able to sustain it. So it came a phase where people started leasing. Getting into the market was much quicker. I think now getting up spaces is even quicker, right? It's on demand rather than you're really planning for it and building it out, right? So when we thought about Smartworks and what are the advantages that we can give to the high growing companies that are entering into India or some of the companies that require the flexible solutions, we realized that one thing that can differentiate you is on demand offices, right? With our strategy, it is very simple. We realize what is core to your business is delivering what your customer really wants. And that is the core for our customers also. What we focus on is making sure that the office environment within which they need to deliver this is present for them across the country on demand. They can scale up from 500 seats to 5,000 seats or scale down from 5,000 seats to 500 seats, right? That flexibility right now lies at the center. So I think offices have now become a commodity where companies want it as and when their business plan allows them to get it and want the flexibility of scaling across the country.
Sudish, I want to come to you. 40% of BNY's AI hubs are located in India. That's a sizable number to have here in India, and perhaps, a feather in the India growth stories cap, I would say. So can you share what it means to really own the product life cycle in the AI age here in India, and how much of a role does your GCC play for the global success of BNY?
A lot of times, GCCs have always had the aspiration to be end to end. Now, if you have to think about AI and if we are to really drive transformation, and that is one of the pivots that we are doing, we started with narrow pilots of AI solutions. Now we are thinking about how do you think about AI in the context of end to end. This is a great opportunity for people in GCCs to get exposed to what does an end to end look like. Now, we've always heard people in GCC say we want to be closer to the client, we want to engage and interact more with the client. But a lot of our transformation can be transforming the client journeys. And if the GCCs can start thinking about that, they then get access to an area that they've always aspired. right, to have in GCC. So I think it's also very important to start thinking about how can AI really help GCCs get to some of the aspirations that we always had, but we now have an accelerator through AI to get into those areas that we might have always talked about, but not really made an impact faster.
While we're talking of acceleration, let's also talk about some of the gaps. And, you know, from your point of view, when you look at the Maharashtra GCC ecosystem or the India GCC ecosystem at large, what are some of the key gaps that a national GCC policy that CII is suggesting can help solve? And how far ahead on this path are we right now?
It's a great question. It's national, it's local. But I'll tell you, I have an opportunity to represent, to even be part of the National Council. And the good news is the central government understands it. So our finance minister actually chairs the National Council. So we are basically talking about, there are only 4 or 5 specific areas. Because I see an organization structure where there will be digital workers. That will be part of an org structure. They may not be even human beings. At some point, human in the loop will be also having digital workers. So second, I think there needs to be a very clear-cut perspective as to why India. Let's not forget one thing, that have the digital connected world that we live in today, the opportunities can be anywhere. So I think it's all about really bringing in that skill sets, bringing in that culture. The third piece is they need to invest in infrastructure, make it much easier for us to, commute. CI is pushing hard, industry is pushing hard. And it's not only that forum. There are multiple forums at the state level. Almost all state governments are running programs or coming up with policies.
Talking of talent, Samir, I want to come to you with this idea that you've been sort of promoting of tech leadership being mini CEOs. Now, can you elaborate a little bit about that, and what would that mean really for the relationship of Indian GCCs to their parent companies?
Well, yeah, I wasn't aware that you've done so much research on the mini CEO stuff, but I really mean it. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, whatever function you run, you're running a P&L in your particular tech shop or a non-tech shop, and you're driving the client outcomes. You have to manage the finances, operations, people, stability, product ownership, client journeys, etc., etc. So it's a 360-degree all-rounder kind of roles, which any of the leaders in the GCC nowadays do and are being seen as. Transformation Hub, clearly, we all agree as a group that India is now at the pivotal point that we can lead transformation rather than just participating in the transformation. And that is where the focus area is, for most of the GCCs.
Neetish, I'd like you to add to that. Samir spoke of trust and a lot of the R&D innovation and a lot of frontline work now happening from India. We're not the back office anymore. In your experience of having served hundreds of clients, what are some of the organizational features that really distinguish GCCs operating as global hubs of innovation, global control nodes, as opposed to those who are still a little far away from achieving that state status, and they are aspirational but not there yet?
No, so there's a very big difference in workplaces or how people build up their spaces when you look at delivery and when you look at innovation. Delivery is very standard. India was for the longest time known for delivery, right? Work used to come from abroad. You need to deliver on certain days, and it was mapped out. You need the X number of people to deliver it. Desks were fake. There was not a lot of innovation. There was not a lot of input that the Indian ecosystem was doing within that, right? We were just delivering what we were asked for. I think what has really changed is exactly, what the other panelists have said, that they've already started investing so much in solving problems, innovating, understanding what are the problem statements that are coming and how are you solving those. When you're looking at that ecosystem, the ecosystem, whether it's your office space, whether it's your your centers that of excellences that you design, has to be very different than a delivery center, right? It is about people collaborating together. It is about people coming in and understanding, working together, whether it's through agents or with each other. And how can these offices enable you to do that, right? If you look at most of the offices which were made 10, 12 years back, they were mainly very standard. You would have those running desks where people used to come and work out of those. Now, most of those companies have also evolved where they are coming and saying, you know, about 40% of my workforce is going to always be hybrid. I'm still going to provide space for them, but you give me a different solution so that I can enable them to come back to work. I can enable them to collaborate. Your workspace can activate that collaboration if you design it in a particular manner, right? Where you make sure that the person who's coming in feels that he has the ability of working with their colleagues and not individually contributing anymore. India is probably at the center of reskilling their workforce faster than anyone else. Yes, there are a few steps that you need to take before you're able to get there, but I think we can do that. We've done that in the past in a smaller manner, but I think we can do that much quicker with some of the new initiatives that are coming in. And just learning on how we can innovate more and solve more problems is, I think, what is going to lead to more growth within the ecosystem.
So, Sudish, given that there is extensive competition for the same talent in the GCC pool. We are the GCC capital of the world right now, and every GCC is vying for talent. At BNY, how do you set yourselves apart in the eyes of early stage talent? And what do you specifically look for in early stage recruits?
Yeah, so I think this is a topic that's been much discussed, right? Today we talk about it in the context of perhaps AI, but even otherwise, we've always talked about talent. We've always talked about employability, right? Uh, some part of it is on the academia, but a lot of it is on us. How do we reach out? How do we engage? How do we provide them exposure? In fact, just this week, we have interns who come into our organizations, and they literally come into all of our organizations. They spend time at different points in time, depending on whether you're coming from a normal campus college or an engineering college. The timings may vary in terms of when they come, right? I saw an example where a group of interns came in February. We gave them some exposure to do some process design, leveraging AI and all of that, and they came up with some solutions. Now, that's the plan, is to hand it over to the next set of engineering interns who come in a couple of months so that they can then take this piece of work and they can now start thinking about how do you build solutions out of it, right? Now, when I think about it, these are all examples of how different organizations, including ours, is trying to give those right exposures to people to have an opportunity to immerse very quickly. In my mind, it's as much about the academia investing in reskilling, upskilling, but it's also about the corporates walking the other mile to kind of come forward and really build this ecosystem.
Right. All right. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. And Amit, going to ask you to put on your AGCO hat now. Your GCC has a purpose, the purpose to make a difference in the lives of farmers. Now, in this scenario, of course, purpose would be shaping some of the decision making, but then profits are also to be looked at. To purpose and profits pull in different directions. How do you align the two?
I think it starts with the purpose that we have 8.5 billion people in the world who will hit 9 billion by 2050. What that means is the arable land is going to, agriculture, whatever we can do is going to reduce, shrink, more mouths to feed. And that is a purpose that we try to think about every day when we come into work. We are very multifunctional. We just don't do tech. We do hardcore engineering. We have made certain changes in our organization. So from the leadership perspective, we put in, there was a statement, vision statement is farmer first. Speak up and team up. These are our cultural beliefs. So that really helps because for us, the farmer is what we serve. We don't use the word internal customers. These are all stakeholders. We work together to serve the purpose. What we've done in our GCC is we decided, since we are so multifunctional, we cannot just say we're going to come up with tech solutions. The tech solutions need to work with our engineering solutions, need to work with our supply chain solutions. Finally, the product needs to be shipped. So you get a perspective of what does it mean from a product. For us, a product is an end-to-end experience is very, very important. We are now starting to design strategic platforms within the parent organization. Right. It takes time. You have to build trust by delivering. So we have made significant progress. It's about serving a problem which is impacting not only us, but impacting the world.
Samir, coming to you with that now, obviously GCCs need to be large and capable, but along with that, structurally, they have to be built for velocity. And, I'll pick up that term resilience yet again. Now, you're about 100 days into your new role at UBS. So, what have you learned about what it takes to really make that happen?
Well, yeah, the 100 days have been very exciting. So,
Mm.
if you think about, you mentioned two keywords, velocity and resiliency. They're not competing. They are pretty much the foundation of any organization. We talked about resiliency in the past, right? I mean, if you look at pandemic, if you look at geopolitical stuff, I mean, India continues to perform from that ecosystem perspective. Velocity is very important. And I think the speed at which you can reorganize your GCC in a way where you are adopting and becoming the innovation hub as a horizontal. Sudish mentioned about horizontalization. And I think you look at innovation as horizontal, you look at ops transformation as horizontals, right? And that's the power of the ecosystem that we need to drive forward using technology. And the speed is coming through because if you think about adoption of the AI tools, every persona in the organization needs to become much more efficient on a year-on-year basis or a month-on-month basis. And whether it's a developer persona, whether it's an ops specialist, whether it's a finance specialist, I mean, we are looking at how do we make that persona with the power of technology in the hands of ours and kind of now fuel it so that we can deliver code faster to production or make the organization respond to threat actors more quickly than them attacking us, right? And so those are the kind of look at vulnerabilities around and the velocity at which we need to deliver that is of the prime time hour.
Well, final round of questions for all of you. And this one, I want some quick thinking on the feet, maybe 30 seconds each to leave us with this thought on after global product ownership, what is next for India's GCCs? What would you imagine, would be the evolution in the India GCC story? And Neetish, you want to start?
No, I think it's about innovation. How much more can we innovate? We're not just restricted to, things that are coming our way. We need to maybe go a step forward and try to innovate ourselves, figure out what are some of the other challenges. A lot of people here in the room are already solving that. But I think that's the way to go forward because I think innovation is what is going to drive growth going forward. So I think keep innovating, making sure that you're solving some sort of a problem.
All right. Samir?
My take is, at the cost of repeating, right? India is not just where work gets done, needs to get co-created with the board and driving client outcomes.
Owning functional outcomes of specific areas, you need to be in the mind map of your CEO. And he's not looking at India, I have a great center in India, but you know what, this center is actually part of what I'm trying to achieve in terms of my 3 to 5 year strategy. The second point is, don't be afraid to fail. When you innovate, you're going to fail 7 out of 10 times. Focus on the 3 that you're going to win.
I would say shift from being the engine room to the brain.
That's very well summed up. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate you joining us here today on the GCC Leadership Exchange on the Pune edition of this series. Thank you very much and wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you so much to everyone on the panel too.
Today's most consequential takeaway is unmistakable. The true transformation of Pune's GCC story is not just technical, it is strategic. The centers that will define the next decade are those with the clarity to own outcomes, the courage to reimagine legacy, and the organizational design to sustain velocity at scale. That's a wrap of this edition of Forbes India and Smartworks GCC Leadership Exchange at Pune. Thank you very much for joining us. Until next time, it's goodbye.
Forbes India GCC Leadership Exchange in association with Smartworks.